you could just explain your reasonings why you signed on with the bill.
I think there's probably been no issue that has gotten more discussion and more input from members of the legislature and the public in the past few years that I've been in the legislature as the issue of whether or not New York State should begin the process of horizontal hydrofracking, right? It started, I think when I first got elected, the issue was just starting to bubble up in 2005, 2006 session. And in 2007, it was really beginning to gain some attention among people who represented the Catskill region and the watershed area, and people started looking at what was happening in Pennsylvania, and it appeared that New York State was going to go down the road of maybe beginning the process of hydrofracking in the Marcellus Shale region. And as a result of that discussion, a lot of people came forward. Local governments passed bans, moratoriums in their area. The state has grappled with how do we do this, what do we do? But what has happened since then, because we've taken so long to address this issue, we're learning more and more about the dangers of hydrofracking, and we're learning more and more about what it can do to our environment. One of the issues we've now come to realize is that when you hydrofrack, you're also releasing more radon. And radon is one of the leading causes of lung cancer. Staten Island, where I live, has one of the highest rates of radon in the entire downstate region. So we became very concerned about the potential impact of hydrofracking and how it could increase radon in New York State. So Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal, who carries the bill in the Assembly, she contacted me and said, I think this is something that you would want to get in front of because of Staten Island being, ground zero with respect to radon, and she's absolutely right. So there's a lot of pressure on the state right now. People are, every day you read the New York Post, you would think that our entire economy is going to collapse if we don't adopt hydrofracking in New York State and drill. So there's a lot of pressure on us. But the more information we have, the more we realize that we have been absolutely right in slowing this process down and demanding that we make decisions based upon the science, not upon some idea that we're going to make a particular amount of money off of it. Because we can't fix this if we make a mistake. So the more we learn, the more we don't like it, and the more we're convinced that we're going in the right direction of saying no to hydrofracking in New York State.
Do you think this bill will stop that? I think this bill will definitely be the one.
I think it's part of it. There's a moratorium bill that I'm a co-sponsor of as well. There's ambivalence on the part of the governor's office right now because they're getting the same information that members of the legislature are. They don't want to make a mistake either. And there are people who say, well, do a limited pilot project. Just do it in the Southern Tier, and let's see how that works out. Well, that might be something that we could do, but what happens if everyone who says this is too dangerous is right? Will we be able to, repair the damage to our environment? Will we be able to repair the damage to the people who live in that region? I don't know, and that's not a risk that I'm willing to take.
Couldn't they just look at fracking has been going on for a while. Couldn't they look Pennsylvania's right there. Could they just go look at that?
Well, yes, we could. In fact, I'm going out to Pennsylvania, I think the beginning of June, to tour one of the sites there and see what's actually happening there. We've had many people come from Pennsylvania to testify at hearings here just about how dangerous it has been. And at the same time, you'll have people who come and tell you about how it's been the solution to all their economic difficulties. Somewhere in the middle, I'm sure, is more of the truth, but before we make any decisions in New York, we need to have all the information available, and information that's based on science. Senator Ravella from Queens, he introduced a bill a few weeks ago that we just moved out of the Labor Committee called CJ's Law, which would establish worker safety standards. In the current hydrofracking industry in New York State, there aren't any. So we know that it's dangerous. We're looking to establish worker standards. So why would we proceed any further until we've been able to determine the safety of the current system by which we hydrofrack in New York State?
Where do you want to go after this bill?
Where do we want to go after this? We want to get this bill passed. We want to get the moratorium passed. We've recently had a court ruling from, I think, one of the Supreme Courts that says that local governments can establish their own ban on hydrofracking. That was up against tremendous opposition from the gas industry. And it's interesting because it's kind of like it's ironic when you think about it, because people who are concerned about the environment understand that we need to find alternative methods of, of energy delivery, that we have to move away from fossil fuels, that we have to become more energy efficient. And natural gas does provide that, but at the same time, in an effort to get a more energy efficient environment, we can't destroy the very environment that we're trying to save. So that's the irony in this whole discussion. We do need to find other ways to deal with our energy delivery system in New York, but we don't need to poison the state in the process.
Do you think in the future there'll be laws and legislation that'll be for environmentally friendly?
I believe so. This, the issue of hydrofracking, as I said, has gotten more attention than just about anything else I've ever seen in the 8 years I've been in the Senate now. And what has happened is almost everybody has paid attention to it because of the potential damage to the state. So I think we've awakened people who have never really been interested in the environment at all, and they're starting to look at it differently, starting to realize that we as members of the legislature, we are shepherds of the environment here, and we have to do everything possible to protect it for future generations.
This bill that you're co-sponsoring with Radon basically addresses a need to regulate the gas that's coming in. There's already been an infrastructure put in place. What I'm wondering is whether there's also a need to legislate so that people have options for other forms of energy other than bringing natural gas in. Is there any kind of legislation that's on the boards or that people have been thinking about introducing?
I'm not sure, but again, we're all consumed with this idea of how do we create a society that has become less dependent upon dirty oil and fossil fuels and coal. There's no such thing as clean coal. I love when they talk about clean coal. There's no such thing as clean coal, right? But there are challenges to that. We're on the verge of closing Indian Point because Indian Point has not been a good neighbor in Westchester, but Indian Point also provides a significant amount of energy to the downstate region. We have to replace that. We're concerned about this energy superhighway that the governor talks about, which would bring energy down through the Niagara Falls region into the downstate region. These are complicated questions. We are a society now that demands probably 100 times more in energy output than my own parents' generation did, or our grandparents, and that's not going to change. It's going to become even more challenging. But at the same time, we have to deal with local governments that don't want us to impose things on them. We have to deal with towns and villages that don't want it. Perfect example, we have in Staten Island the largest environmental disaster, man-made environmental disaster, the Fresh Kills landfill. Now it's slowly being converted into a park. It's going to take anywhere from 10 to 30 years for that process to be completed. It's a tremendous piece of property. It is also the perfect place for windmills. People are opposed to it. They're scared. They think windmills somehow are dangerous. I don't know why, So it's complicated to try and figure out how to change our energy system. Most people, the only thing they really want to know about is when they walk in the room and they flick the switch, the light comes on. They don't really think too much about how it got there. And that is what's led us to where we are these days. We have to start thinking about how we get that energy into that light bulb, and how do we do it cleanly, efficiently, and in the most economically feasible way for people.
How do we go about educating people then what's actually happening when they turn that light on?
Just the way you're doing it, talking to people. The internet has turned into probably the most important messenger, I think, in modern times. People will see these YouTube videos. They go online and they do research. They don't have to leave the house anymore to learn things. They can sit down and they can just think about it, Google it, and find something out. And I think that's really important. I've probably gotten more letters, more calls about this issue than anything else I've ever dealt with since I got elected. So we're having an effect on the way people think about energy, and the way they think about the environment, and the way they think about government's reaction to it.
Can I just ask you, do you think fracking should be banned legislatively, that there should be some measure introduced into legislators?
I do. I'm one of the co-sponsors of the moratorium on hydrofracking in New York State. Other people may not agree with me. They may think that we should, allow local governments to make that decision. I've taken my position. I think we need to do it. I voted for the moratorium in 2009, which expired, I think it was a year and a half ago. And we think we need to reinstate it because we don't have all the answers. And we should not have a rush to judgment. We don't need to make the mistakes that Pennsylvania made. This is New York. We can be a leader. We lead in so many ways. This is one that we should lead on.
So I guess my last question has to do with, I'm from New York, and I've been going around and looking at the Spectra pipeline, at the Rockaway pipeline, and seeing that they're proceeding at a fast pace to just put this infrastructure in place, that the constituents of New York State and New York City have not been consulted about these pipelines. There's a process that just seems almost inexorable to put these pipelines in place, and then you have to deal with the consequences of having high-pressure gas delivered into densely populated areas. Is there any way of rolling back that process as you see it?
I'm not sure because they've complied with the current regulations, which say you have to hold public hearings, which they did. They sought public input, and then they moved forward. They're taking a tremendous gamble, though, because they're assuming that they're going to be able to proceed. Well, they've invested a lot of money. It may turn out that they don't get to go forward with this project, and then they're going to have to absorb the cost of, that gamble. But again, if you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I would say, most people wouldn't even know about it. They wouldn't have attended the public hearings. They wouldn't have registered any concern about it. Now, people are paying attention.
They didn't have the technology back then
Right.
to actually go in and get after some of this gas.
Mm-hmm. But it's just this whole public education process that has raised the level of this discussion to a point where when the decisions get made, they'll be made with the full input of the public, which is the way things are supposed to happen.
Can you be specific with this specific radon bill? In points of there are parts of it that give certain other, not groups, but bodies of the government, basically to fine these companies if they don't comply with some of the stuff.
And also a private right of action to people, individuals who can bring litigation against the entities. And I think that's important because there's nothing that gets people's attention more than the fact that you can sue them. And we have in the bill standards by which the Department of Environmental Conservation has to impose these regulations, and the DEC is the best steward of our environment. In effect, if you speak to anybody who's ever tried to build anything in New York State, anywhere near an area that requires DEC approval, they will tell you how difficult it is. On Staten Island, we run into that problem often because we are, a unique area. We're an island, we're the industrial waterfront, we're recreational waterfronts, we have tidal wetlands, we have just about every, potential environmental effect. And talk to anybody who's ever tried to build anything there, and they will tell you just how rigorous DEC is with protecting public land.
Did you have anything else you'd like to add?
To the people of the 23rd Senate District, again, if you don't know anything about hydrofracking, I seriously hope that you will take the opportunity to learn about it, because the decisions that we have to make about this are critically important, not just today, not just for today, but for the future. I would really hope that by now people have formed an opinion, and if they haven't, this is the chance for them to do so. It's critically important that we don't screw this up, because we can't go back and it's not like legislation where you pass it and you say, you know what, the unintended consequence was this, and we have to amend it and fix it. We cannot amend the environment. We cannot fix it if we screw it up. So it's critically important that we do it right the first time.
Would you be willing to do a showing of Dear Governor Cuomo in Staten Island?
Absolutely. As you know, I hosted a showing of Gasland a couple of years ago so that people of Staten Island could come and see it at the College of Staten Island. Sadly, I wasn't even able to attend it myself because I was up here on legislative business. So this time I hope I'll be able to see the movie with the group, and I would love to do that.
And there actually is, it just came out at Gaslands too. So
I heard.
we could do that.
That's great. I would love to do that.
Yes. Would you like to add anything else?
just to say, again, I appreciate the efforts that everyone has put into educating people across this state about the seriousness of this issue. We may never have an opportunity to make another decision of this magnitude with respect to the energy policies of the state of New York. We've got to do it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.